The island of Sainte Marguerite is bigger than the island of Saint Honorat. The population used to be the Ligurians, and the island was broken in two with the island of Saint Honorat when there was an earthquake, because both of them went down under the level of the ocean. They called these big islands Lero. L-E-R-O. Then came the Romans. The Romans, with the fortifications and wrecks, were found with many amphoras. The amphoras that you can see in the actual museum on the island. The ceramics also. It was there too when Charles V, Charles Quint ships stopped on taking back François Ier prisoner to Spain. Also because of the geographical location, in 1624, at the request of the Cardinal de Richelieu, a defensive fort was built with its counterpart at the point of the cross, which is Croix in French, the word Croix. Hence, the name today of La Croisette, La Pointe de la Croisette. Then the war with Spain began. 35 enemies' galleys and galleons landed with 3,000 soldiers, but led by the Marquis de Santa Cruz. He had 2 Spanish forts built at the end of the island. Finally, Sainte Marguerite was taken over by Richelieu's fleet, and the Spanish flag were exposed at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. One of the biggest mysteries of the 17th century started on the island of Sainte Marguerite. On the old town of Cannes, one can see above the porch of the entrance door of a convent the famous Masque de Fer, iron mask. But who was he really? Today, no documents proves yet his identity. The Iron Mask, the Masque de Fer, was an exceptional prisoner to whom no one could talk, and he had to wear all the time a mask on his face. He was an anonymous prisoner treated with many cares in the jail of Fort Royal. He had furniture, a comfortable bed, good meals, and even twice a month a prostitute used to come to give him pleasure. It has been claimed that he could be the musketeer of D'Artagnan. It is also assumed that it would be the dwarf Nabot, black slave whose queen wife of Louis XIII would have had a daughter. This Métis girl who existed had been named Superior Mother of the Benedictines, and throughout her life she received discreet visits from the royal family each month. There is also the illegitimate son of the King of England, Minister Fouquet, the secretary of the Duke of Mantua, and accomplice of the poisoner Brindevilliers.
Voltaire, who was locked at the Bastille jail in Paris at the same time as the valet of Iron Mask, pretends, knowing from this valet that the man behind the Iron Mask was a twin brother of Louis XIV, the King of France, and his face must never be seen.
There were permanently 25 to 30 prisoners in the royal fort. They represent a danger to the state. In the 17th century, there were Protestant pastors locked up for life. In 1771, stayed the Marquis Jouffroy d'Aban, following a love rivalry with the brother of Louis XVI. From his cell, seeing the galleys maneuvering in front of the island, he invented in 1781 his Sparrowscaff, the first boat powered by a steam engine. When liberated, he set up a paddle wheel boat service on the Rhône in Lyon. The Mississippi steamers are his invention. In 1789, Count Mantel, locked up for many years and finally free, refused to leave his prison and said, "What would I do outside? That cell may be my tomb," and he remained until his death in the fort.
When Napoleon Bonaparte was crowned Emperor of the French in 1800, the fort recovered its original destination of jail. In 1807, the Duchess Rosalie d'Escars was prisoner for 2 months upon return from exile and guilty of bad gossiping against the emperor.
In 1843, the son of King Louis Philippe, the Duke of Aumale, at the time of the conquest of Algeria, made prisoner the troops of Abdelkader. This was what was called Abdelkader's Smala, with women and children, which brought together 350 people. This Smala was deported to the island of Sainte Marguerite and stayed there for a long time. Besides, there is a Muslim cemetery on the island of 200 anonymous graves under the holm oaks and Aleppo pines. The chief, Abdelkader, was imprisoned in town in the Suivez Tower, where you have the old town. The island of Sainte Marguerite became an unusual place to walk. It's a beautiful place, actually. The writer and journalist Prosper Mérimée received the deposed King of Bavaria, Louis I, in exile on the Riviera, and made him visit the island as well as the monastery of Saint-Honorat. During that time in Cannes, the winter season was going full blast. The royal family were coming for the winter vacation in their villas and palaces. Around Christmas time every year, although the adversity of the population from Cannes, during 4 months the German Imperatrice, accompanied by her son, the Crown Prince Wilhelm, future Kaiser, that was 10 years old at the time, were staying at the Grand Hotel at the center of La Croisette.
Ein Schelmusche, Rennbad.
The Prince Wilhelm, not loved by his parents, was curious about everything. He was collecting sea animals and keeping his journal. We've learned that he was going to the island of Sainte Marguerite fort to visit the fortress and the Iron Mask jail. The Imperatrice became friend with the Algerian Smala that were locked into the jail and was painting them watercolors with quite a talent. On this occasion, she discovered the dates, fruits from North Africa that she got as a gift from them. The mother and the child often visited the islands. In 1873, a prestigious prisoner was imprisoned, the Marshal François Bazaine, aged 62, hero of the Crimean and Mexican Wars, winner of Solferino and Sevastopol, but accused unjustly by Gambetta of having betrayed, having capitulated to Sedan before the German armies. He was brought before a martial court and sentenced to death with military degradation. But his sentence was commuted later to 20 years of jail at the fort of Sainte Marguerite. In 1876, his wife, 28 years old, a Mexican, Maria Josefa, helped him to escape the fort. She took a bark, a little boat like the one you can see behind us, and she got her husband who climbed down along the wall of the fort on the court. The run out of this man was so incredible that it really created a big noise at the time. Finally, Bazaine ended up his life in Madrid in 1880, where he escaped and stayed until his death. This is the view that inspired the Imperatrice of Germany, Vicky, to paint her aquarelle water paintings. It is also the wall of the fortress where the Maréchal Bazaine escaped with a rope to go to the ocean and live with a fisherman boat. Le Grand Jardin, the big garden, is the unique private property on the island. One must know that Louis XIV used to come and rest here when we assume he was visiting the Iron Mask across of the island on the other side in the fortress. This big garden is flourished with many botanical flowers and irises, beautiful irises flowers. This property has belonged to many different owners, and now it is the property of a very wealthy Indian billionaire. But before then it used to be with Claude Muller, a promoting developer. St. Marguerite Island has always been protected from the real estate pressure and remain a wilderness area, natural area. At the request of the actual Cannes mayor, Mr David Lisnard, Cannes aims to classify both islands, Saint Honorat and Sainte Marguerite, at the UNESCO World Heritage.
Look, Vanina, the Saint Honorat Island with the church.
Oh yes, I can see the monastery, it's very nice. But you know, Eric, during the French Revolution, the island of Sainte Marguerite was sold to a French actress that was called Miss Saint-Val. And the actual first mayor of Cannes, that was Mr André Ferry, gave it the name then of the island of Marat. But this was only temporary. Then it came back to the name of Sainte Marguerite, the flower, which is very nice.
Fortunately.
Look, Eric, you see this big rock there at the end of the island of Saint Honorat?
Yes.
Well, this is where Paganini, the big composer, was buried for many years, and people were coming to see his grave. Finally, he was moved to Italy to be buried properly. Hello, I am here in Le Suquet with Mr Dagonnot, that belongs to a very old family from Cannes. Mr Dagonnot is a specialist of the Iron Mask. He actually wrote a book. What was the name of the book?
Well, it's 11 years in incarceration in prison for the Masked Affair.
So yes, he wrote a book about the 11 years while the Iron Mask was in the jail on the island of Sainte Marguerite. And please, Mr Dagonnot, tell us a little bit about this mystery of the Masked Affair.
Well, this is one of the mysterious secrets of the French history, because after 350 years, nobody knows exactly who he was. Well, he was somebody related to the French king, to Louis XIV, the Sun King. And it's bizarre, because after 34 years of incarceration, he had, great attachment, great people charge of him, great care, and people really don't understand why a single prisoner for 34 years cost so much money to the French crown. For example, the prison in Sainte Marguerite Island, the jail, was built only for him. Wow. So this prison was built for one prisoners and used by one prisoners. He had 50 guards only for one prisoners.
So he was someone very special. Very
special, very expensive, and somebody who was living, well, of course he didn't have any freedom, but he was living, with luxury, with great luxury. Yeah. He had a fireplace in his prison. He had one servant, a full-time servant, one of his servants.
Special food also?
Special food, the best food. The governor of the prison was, when he was eating once, it was only once a day, and the governor was standing in the prison, inside the cells, but not sitting with him at the table. So the prisoner was sitting and having his lunch or dinner.
It's a sign of respect, right?
It's a great sign of respect. And of course, the governor was a nobleman. He was somebody already quite, it was a marquis and somebody quite important, but he has so much respect and everything. So he had everything. He could have books, he was playing the guitar, and he could have visitors sometimes, but one thing important was missing: freedom.
Yeah. And was he wearing all the time this iron mask that we can see up here? This is not the real one, right? This is not.
It's not the real one, but it's not very far from the real one, because this kind of arms are for for the army and everything. So at the beginning, in 1669, he was wearing this kind of things. And after a few years, people realized, the authority in Versailles Palace realized that he was not dangerous, and he didn't want to escape from the prison.
Although he did normally, from what I heard at the end, and he came here.
So, there is one theory, and this is a very good point, and you're right, and we go back to the history of Cannes, because we could have one prisoner in the island, and after that, after he escaped, he could be living in this tower. And that's the history between these two towers. This is an historic tower, that he was, after escaping from the prison, he went on shore, and he went hiding in Cannes, in this tower, and he died here in the basement. And people say in this part of Cannes, there is still the ghost in some time. So during the night, the Mascot Fair is trying to explain to people who he was and why he was incarcerated and so many years in prison. So, yeah.
And who does these beautiful towers belong to, and what was the original meaning of building this tower in Le Suquet, the old part of Cannes?
So that was the walls. That was a city wall. But Cannes was a very, very small village. It was a fisherman village, a very small village. But of course, as every village open to the Mediterranean, there is pirates, there is Saracens, and so you need a bit of safety. And there is walls in every single village. And this tower was just one of the 4 towers to get inside the very small village of Cannes. So behind me, that was the countryside, and there was olive trees, and that was a countryside. So that way.
It belongs to whom now, this tower?
So this tower was restored and partly rebuilt by somebody very clever and very nice, Mr. Lecomte, and
de la Tour, the Count of la Tour,
a nobleman, and le Comte de la Tour, and he spent a lot of money, and especially opening again the basement where could be the Mascot Fair was detained, and he transforms the rest of the house in a private flats, and he lives there and he died there a few years ago.
Here I am in the fortress of the Fort Royal in Sainte Marguerite to conclude this first episode on the island. I believe there will be more, because there's so much to see and to know. But in any case, we look forward to see you again in our future episodes. Don't forget to follow us and to like us. Bye-bye.